I got to tell you, pre-COVID, I traveled a lot. And so I would walk through the Dallas Love Field Airport and think, oh my goodness, we ought to be in here. Like, we truly ought to be here in here. And you know how I am, Tex, kind of like world domination, takeover spirit. I'm like, we got to do a takeover of this airport. And of course, when I start to envision a complete takeover, having the Mavs out there, a whole new look, of course, you know who I thought about. There's one person who I know can carry out that vision for us, and that's, of course, you, Tex. So it was, thank you for really leading and carrying out that vision. Why did you think it was a good fit for us?
I just think, it was an interesting time, obviously, with COVID hitting. And I just think it was something that we could do to obviously speak to the team spirit, but just also to uplift everybody, and their coming and goings. And it gave us an opportunity with the airport being down traffic-wise for a while, that when everybody got a chance to start to come back to travel, they got something that was warm and inviting and spoke to them from this city.
Hello. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for Dallas Love Field's Lead with Love. I'm Sheri Crosby Wheeler, and I'm the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at Fossil Group. I'm also an aspiring comedian, so hopefully I'll be able to get some jokes in today. And with me is my good friend, Scott Orr, and he's a Vice President of Government Relations at Fidelity Investments. And so welcome to Dallas Love Field's Lead with Love, Scott, and take it away.
Hey, Sheri, thanks. And hello, everybody on Facebook and YouTube. This is very exciting. We love doing this podcast, and thanks to Love Field for putting it on. And I'm proud that my favorite airport is championing the topics we're going to be discussing today. But, I just want to make sure that I'm not going to have to tell you where my favorite parking spot is in parking room. I travel a lot, and I don't care how busy the airport is. I've got a certain little section that always has a few spots. All I'll say is you go up a ramp or two, you go down a ramp or two. But when you get back around, there's always about 10 spots within about 15, 20 feet of 20 spots of the terminal. But I'm not leaving it at that, because you know what? They'll all be taken if I say too much more. So anyway.
You're not going to tell us, Scott?
Not a bit. Maybe I'll tell you privately. Hit me in the DM. We'll see.
You're only going to tell a couple thousand friends about your...
Exactly. That's the point.
Well, you know what? And Love Field is also my favorite airport as well. When I first moved to Dallas, I lived right across the street from Love Field. And I thought, okay, I'm living across the street from the airport, and people are like, it's going to be loud. It was not. I was fine. And I loved being able to just bop over to the airport. Like, I didn't have to take a long drive and just go. And I miss that. I miss that a lot. But it's still my favorite airport. Whenever I'm making traveling plans and I'm deciding which one, I'm like, oh, good, Love Field. That's when I get really excited. So
Absolutely.
And you know what? To be on this podcast, they also love it, which I appreciate them, sent us these really cute masks. Look it. And I've been wearing mine everywhere. I've been putting it on, and it says Lead with Love, the name of this podcast. And so it's, basically a reminder to keep your mask on when you're in the airport and stay safe. So
absolutely. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had one too, and then a friend took it, and actually, I think it's in Nashville somewhere because they liked it so much. So who knows? Hopefully, someone there is enjoying it as well.
All right. So, on a last note, before we get to questions, y'all may have noticed in the introduction that we showed a clip of the Dallas Mavericks takeover inside level 2 of Garage C. So, the next time you fly out of Love Field, make sure you park with the Mavs. And guess what? I'm flying out of Love Field this week. I have not seen it. So, we will definitely be parking there. I'm going to walk around. I might take a picture. I didn't even know it was there because I'm just parking at Love Field for so long. I've always been like a B girl, and then I was an A. So now I need to explore C, and I'm going to go see
Absolutely.
the awesome artwork.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dallas Love Field's Lead with Love brings together voices from across North Texas to examine how strong leadership, respect for diversity and inclusion, and the celebration of local culture make a difference in our community. And I know we were both very community oriented, so I'm thrilled that we can be talking about this today. And again, I'm just thrilled that you invited me, Sheri. I'm honored to be here in this chat with you.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have you, Scott. And you know what? I was thinking back. I'm like, when did I meet Scott? And Cindy Plazowitz, she
That's
introduced us
right.
so
That is
many
right.
years
Yes.
ago. And when I told her about this, she said two of my favorite people. And I just wanted to say thank you before
That's
we get
great.
started, because you've always been so generous with your time. You've been a great mentor. Anytime I'm like, Scott, can I talk to you? Scott, I have a question. You're always saying thank you. So I appreciate you, and I want to say that so everybody can hear it.
And I knew
So
I knew you were super smart and sharp from day one as well. I think we met at Starbucks and had a whole conversation about
yeah,
diversity in our workplaces and how we can show more leadership. And I think it's just been great ever since. That's awesome.
yeah. So everybody who's listening, leave your comments on Facebook and on YouTube, and we'll do our best to answer any questions that you have. So we're gonna get to it, and this is gonna be exciting. So please just ask any questions that you might have. I know that between the both of us, we'll answer them. So we're gonna get started with some interesting questions. The first question that I want to bring up is, what is the hardest job you've ever had, and what did you learn from it? I'll start with you, Scott.
Okay, it's a good question, and I think when I say the hardest job, it's because I made it hard in this situation. So I started my career after I got my MBA and everything at Fidelity. I was a portfolio manager, very financial. After a few years, I got a little burnt out, and I kind of left. It wasn't really burnt out, but I was looking for a new challenge, and I wanted to do something more for the world, basically. And so I come back to Texas, and we spent some time looking around. I ended up in the nonprofit world in a small shop, but then a bigger shop hired me, and that's where I'm going to talk about it. It's a large organization that works with people in financial crisis, here in the Metroplex. I won't name it just because you get into the nitty gritty, but I walked into that job thinking, and I was a CEO, thinking I was their gift. I was God's gift to them. And even
Mhm.
though they had some issues culturally and things that I wanted to help, I didn't listen. I came out, I think there was some sort of inherent almost arrogance in me that I doesn't normally show, but when I look back on it, I felt like, hey, I'm walking in to help fix them. And I think that's the attitude they felt from me. And it took me a long time. In fact, about 4 months in, the former president called me in and said, Scott, you're acting like a spoiled executive right now. And
Wow.
he said, you resign or you fix this. And he's like, you know what?
Mhm.
That was a wake up call for me. And I stopped and kind of thought, what am I doing wrong? What should I be doing differently? A lot of it was listening. A lot of it was being more humble, but a lot of it was just saying, hey, I'm going to learn from this. And I was there for 6 years. So again, we did a lot of great things, but I think almost the entire time, the way I got off on the wrong foot kind of hampered me throughout that whole period. And again, I'm proud of all the things that happened in that organization. And again, of course, I'm back at Fidelity now. But at the same time, I would definitely learn to get off on the right foot, be a good listener, make sure that you lead by example and lead by collaboration, not try to come top down. That's one thing I learned. Again, like I said, that was the hardest job and the hardest lesson I've ever learned, honestly. How
Wow.
about you?
Yeah, that's so interesting that you say that about listening, because that follows us
Hmm.
throughout any career path that we take, whether it twists and it turns.
Right.
And I remember that story from talking to you way back when. For me, my hardest job, and I'll tell y'all also what I learned from it, I was a housekeeper. Um,
Mm.
I was a housekeeper at a large hotel chain. And it was during the time when I left school for a period of time because I let doubts come in. What I now know is imposter syndrome, and that's something in the D&I world. It was happening to me back then. So I let those doubts creep in, and I left school, and I was a housekeeper. And I tell you, to this day, no matter what I've done, that is the hardest job I ever had. I mean, physically, I worked hard. Dealing with people and customers, I worked hard. And it was a humbling job. And what I learned from that job beyond hard work was a leader is not a title. So there was a manager that was there that when I came in, he was not a nice person, and he didn't have empathy. He didn't have any empathy.
Right.
Versus there was a lady there, and she was the one who was tasked with teaching me how to do the job well. She didn't speak English very well, but she was the sweetest thing, and she was a leader. Although that wasn't in her title, she was a leader. The way she treated me, the way she helped me to learn. And I'm like, okay, it's not about what title you have. It's not about how high you think you ascend. It's about how you treat people and how you give them dignity, regardless, because everybody in any job is necessary. Everybody is. It doesn't matter from janitor up to CEO, and no one's better than anyone else. So that's what I learned from that job.
That's impressive. And again, that I totally agree with you. I think that's fantastic when you can learn from peers and peers that take a lead, and that inspires you, right, to do the same thing when you're in group settings. So, what brought you to Dallas in the first place, Sheri? I mean, I know you've been very involved in the diversity and inclusion space, and of course now you got your great job at Fossil, which I'm so proud of you for having that job. But what brought you to Dallas in the first place? What were you considering?
And it's so interesting because I tell people now in my job that I've been working in D&I space for a little while, I tell people that I was running scared from diversity and inclusion for a little while. Like I didn't, it was always a part of me. It was always in the background. But I was running scared from it probably as a profession. And I didn't know it could be one, but I was seeking it. So the reason why I came to Dallas is because I lived in a different city that there were, people of diverse characteristics there, but it was all one type of diversity. And I said, no, I don't want it to be all one type of diversity. I want as much of a mixture as I can get. And that's what I saw in Dallas. And when I say mixture, I mean ages, races, genders, nationalities, backgrounds, different, just as much mixture as I could get. And I know I could go to like a really big city, but I'm not like a go to New York type person. That's too many people. Like, that's outrageous. But as much as I could get within my tolerance for number of people. And so I looked to Dallas. And the thing about it was, I grew up in Texas. And so I grew up about 3 hours from Dallas. And we always thought Dallas was just so awesome, like going to Dallas to get school clothes. We're going to Dallas. And my best friend's dad lived near Carter High School. And so Redbird Mall, we see a resurgence in it now. I remember back when it was the place to be. We're like, we're going to the mall. We're going to Redbird. So that was, I always had Dallas in my mind. And then when I became a professional and started working, and I wanted a place that had a lot of diversity, Dallas rose to the top of the list.
Yeah.
And that's how I came here. How about you?
That's great. I'm like you. I grew up in Abilene, West Texas, about 3 hours away, and same thing.
1
Dallas
hour
was the
from
big
where
city.
I grew up. 1 hour from where I grew up.
Who knew? Who knew? But we, same thing. It was big city. That was the big city. That's where you went. That's where the happening was. And so I went to Abilene Christian University undergrad and got married, and my wife's from Irving. So the second we came here to Dallas. So that really is what led us many, many years ago here back in the mid 80s. But we keep coming back. I've lived in Boston. I went to school in Boston. I came back and worked for Fidelity for a while in New Hampshire, and we came back. And again, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of diversity here. I think it's an interesting city that is going through a life cycle. There was a period when it was considered very conservative back in the Dallas, the TV show days of Dallas, and you think of it as a very red, red state and a red city. But when it comes down to it, it's a pretty progressive city. But it still has a lot of issues. And honestly, I'm part of the Dallas Citizens Council, and there's a lot of focus on diversity and inclusion there. I'm part of the Dallas Regional Chambers Board. And again, same thing, a huge focus. The DRC has done a great job especially in the last year or so, of really saying we're going to dig in deep on these issues. And I don't know if you've heard Dr. Michael Waters speak. He's a pastor at Abundant Life. Amy, we definitely need you to listen to his presentation. He presented to the Dallas Regional Chamber Board just last week, and it was shocking. Some of the history of Dallas. And I knew there were issues. I knew that we've had racism here in the past, but to know that most of the leaders of the city were part of the KKK not that long ago. I mean, we have highways named after people that were in the KKK. Those are things that we are still wrestling with as a city. And I think there's a lot of people trying very hard. We have got a great mayor. We've got a great city council. We've got a great, county leadership as well. And I think everybody is laser focused on trying to make things better. And that's what I appreciate about Dallas. It's like we know we're not perfect by any stretch. Like every big city has its issues, but I just really am heartened by the fact that everywhere I turn, there are people that are focused on diversity and inclusion and what can we do better and how can we, make sure that we know about what happened in our past so it doesn't continue to happen in the future. And again, that's what I love about Fidelity too. And I know you feel the same about Fossil. We are very focused on it. We are really trying to make sure there's a difference you go on. And that's what I know best because that's what I deal with on a day-to-day basis. But I am very glad to be here. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
Right. And I kind of brought my husband over. He's from Detroit. And now he's just like, I love Dallas. He's all pumped up. So I'm like, hey,
we have tons of New Englanders with Fidelity, being a Boston-based company. I can't even tell you. I mean, literally hundreds of my colleagues are all New Englanders. It's like, we're never going back. We stay down here. So they like it. They like it down here. So what are some of the things, Sheri, that you are dealing with that you just, wish people knew, some of the topics that are most kind of front of mind for you, especially when it comes to diversity, inclusion, and all the things along with that?
Yeah. So what's so interesting, going back to what you talked about, how different entities and organizations within Dallas are very laser focused on D&I, especially since last year. I think one of the things that DEI practitioners and people working in the field are focused on is keeping that momentum going. That's one of the main things because, people, we're just a society of like, hey, we thought about it, it should be done. And I'm like, no, it's it's a long game. You think about our workplaces, and our workplaces are some of the most diverse places that we are, because when we go into our neighborhoods, when we go into our churches, we segregate ourselves. And so that's why it seems like it takes so long in our workplaces, because it's not familiar. And we shouldn't segregate ourselves, but we do, and we work on it, and that's why it takes so long. So that's one of the things that I'm focused on, and a lot of diversity and inclusion practitioners are focused on, keeping that momentum going. It's not easy, but I think there are a lot, like you said, the laser focus, a lot more people pushing, and which heartens me. It makes me feel good to know, hey, there are other people who are like, let's go, kind of rowing together those oars. Some other things that obviously have happened, the pandemic, and a lot of women have left the workforce. That's something that, companies are thinking about, like, okay, that's not going to work. We are not going to let that be something that's just okay. It's not. So that's something else that we're focusing on as well. And then I think another thing that I'm always focused on is, how do you make diversity, equity, inclusion concrete for people? How do you make it something that they know they can integrate into their everyday? And I say, hey, look, I work on it too. It has to become habitual.
Right.
So something as simple as, pronouncing someone's name correctly. Scott, you've heard people call me Sheri many times.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's just like, hey, that's someone's name. That's what their parents gave to them. Is so significant. It's so important. And think about what that does when you take the time. And that, to me, that might seem small in DEI, but that's huge. Or building relationships. Something like you're walking down the hall at work, if you're back at work, I hope a lot of people aren't, or you're just walking in a store. Hey, how you doing? Hey, hello, how are you? That's it. That's D&I too, because that first hello might lead to something else, or answering a request from a colleague, hey, can I sit down and talk to you? Or from a stranger on LinkedIn, or from someone connecting you. You
Right.
never know where that's going to lead and what that's going to lead to. Like an awesome relationship with Scott Orr. What about you?
That's great.
What's happening with community outreach?
I agree with all the things you're saying. I think the momentum is key here, and one of the things I think that we always talk about is what you measure is what you improve. And I think one of the issues that we've had, I know Fidelity has, and a lot of the corporate America has had, is that we don't really focus on the exact statistics, and we're too embarrassed to share what the statistics are in diversity.
Don't be.
And Fidelity finally did this after about last year, I believe it was. We basically said we're going to take the bull by the horns and just say, here's where we are, here's what we're trying to get to, and we'll admit right now we should be a more diverse company. We have 50,000 employees, and we're doing better for sure. But women, underserved areas, minorities, we want to make sure that we are measuring what our statistics are and showing and putting them out there so that people know, and we'll say what we're trying to get to. And we're doing that through recruiting, and finding different ways that we can, different sources, different pipelines of talent. And we've had great success with that. But it's not only getting people in the door, it's also promoting them and getting them into management too.
Yeah.
And so those are all the things that we are really, really focused on trying to get more of. And, it's funny, I think corporations are going to need to lead on this. I mean, I think churches are doing it. I think, chambers are doing it. But I really think it's up to the workplace to really be kind of the leaders on this. The other thing here too is, I deal a lot, I'm government relations and public affairs. So I deal a lot with our legislature down in Austin, up in DC. There's a focus here, and it's obviously different, and we're in a very polarized environment, and that's what I really hate about a lot of this is there's so much of this, equity and diversity, equity, inclusion that people agree on, but they're almost afraid to admit it because they don't want to give the other side, a plus. So adding that whole political element has been something I've been trying to really work on as well. And I'll have these private conversations with legislators and say, why are we pushing on this issue right now? Is it important? This issue is really, when it comes down to it, it's going to be discriminatory if you pass this legislation. It doesn't look good for the state. And really trying to dig down and say, let's get past the politics here and just say what's good for all of us, and that's, even though that's not always in my line of work when it comes to, financial issues that I'm advocating for at Fidelity. There's some key issues that we need to be focused as well, because honestly, Texas needs to be viewed as a welcoming state so that we can hire as many people as possible, because we have tons of hiring going on. We're one of those industries that has done well in COVID, and I hate even to link those two, but we've gotten busier and busier over the last year, and we need people, and we need people that want to live in Texas and want to live in Dallas, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and so that's part of what we're working on as well. And I'm proud of the success we're having, but there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, and that's so interesting, Scott, because what you speak to, and I think for Fossil as well, is that DEI is a journey. A lot of people have heard that before. Some people haven't. And so it's a journey. And a part of it too is, the transparency piece. And a lot of companies, ours included, are looking at how can we be more transparent so you can build that trust. So one practitioner said, oh my goodness, and I can't remember his name. If I remember it, I'm going to put it out there because I don't want to take his saying. Yep. But he was like, don't let diversity, equity, and inclusion be your secret friend. Like, bring it out. Each individual and company,
absolutely,
you need to be talking about it. You need to let people know that it's important. So it can't be a secret friend. But that's great, the great work that you are doing at Fidelity. And I know, I've been at Fossil for the past 7 months, and I know we are on a great road, and I'm excited. It's hard work, but it's good work. And so just looking forward to continuing with that.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, did you have something, Scott?
No, I was just going to say, but again, it requires people to make an effort on more than anything. And it requires, Fidelity has had, a head of diversity and inclusion for a long time, but now they have a global head, and they have someone, Wendy John, he's our amazing head of global diversity and inclusion. And she is so laser focused on getting good things to happen. And I just love that part of what's happening. And again, I can say from experience, the teams I work on have gotten more diverse over the last couple of years. And I am constantly amazed at how much really good input comes, because it's not only diversity of gender or race or anything like that. It's diversity of thought, and
Mhm.
people come with different thoughts because of how they were raised and how they were trained and how they were educated. And I just am it's such a richer environment. And I
Mhm.
would go to the mat with anybody saying that, that you shouldn't worry so much about diversity, equity, inclusion, because I think it makes a much more a better product for all of us, and a better
Yeah,
work environment as well.
absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so let's get one or two rapid fire
Yeah,
questions
sure.
in before we go to the audience.
Hmm.
So what is your walk-on song and why that song? Or maybe just your favorite song.
That's so hard, because I am a very diverse person when it comes to music. But I have, boy, man, I should have thought harder about this before we started talking about it. I would say it has to be something. It has to be something by Adele. Fire and Rain, something like that. These days, those are the songs in my head a lot. Is just, I've just uh, that would probably be an Adele song. People might start. How about you?
She has a powerful voice. I love
She
her voice.
does. She does.
I will say I'm a child of hip hop. I like hip hop,
Yep.
and right now I think there's an artist. Unfortunately, he passed away. His name is Nipsey Hussle, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
a song that he has called "Grinding All My Life." And sometimes that's just what it feels like. You're out
Right.
there and you're grinding, but you
That's
keep
right.
pushing. And every time
Absolutely.
I hear that song, I'm like,
Hmm.
yeah, okay,
Hmm.
let me get out
Yeah.
here and do what I need to do. So
Uh-huh.
that's one of the songs I
Absolutely.
really like.
That's good. That's good.
How about your favorite restaurant in Dallas? And what do you like to get?
Oh, I have several of those as well, but I have to say Urbano, Cafe
Oh,
Urbano. It's over on Fitzhugh, kind of farther east of 75 and Ross. It's a small little restaurant. They used to be like maybe 10 tables. Now they've expanded to a little more space, but it's a little tiny strip. It's a BYOB, and I'm a
oh,
big wine lover.
oh,
I've got a wine closet with all, 53 degrees all the time, and which is awesome. You come in from a run, you can go stand in your wine closet to cool down. But when I can bring my own wine and have phenomenal food, and Mitch, that owns it, is just a great guy, and so Urbano is definitely one of our favorite spots. It's casual, it's neighborhood, but man, it is great food, and when you have your own wine, it's even better. How about you?
yeah. For me, I really like, I can't say a favorite because there's so many good restaurants in Dallas, but I
Hmm.
really like True Food Kitchen and I like to get
Oh
their
yeah,
kale salad.
that's awesome.
That kale salad is delicious.
Yes,
All
I
right,
agree.
last rapid fire question. And then I don't know if we have time for some
Hmm.
audience questions.
Hmm.
If you had to park, take a ride share, or get a ride from a friend or family to go to left field, which one would you choose? I know which one I choose.
I normally go on park, to be totally honest, just because of the
Mm.
timing. Sometimes I'm early, sometimes I'm late. And I found, honestly, this is not. It's I guess this is an advertisement, but no, it's often it is cheaper for me to drive and park for several days than it is for me to take an Uber both ways, for example. And
Mhm.
again, same thing. I don't want to make my wife get up at 5 in the morning to take me to the
Right.
airport either. So I usually drive and park, and I love it. It works
Yeah.
perfect. And like I said, especially my place 10 spots away from the terminal. It's always good.
I'm gonna find out that spot. All right, so I think now it's time for some Q&A. I don't know if we
Mhm,
have time.
mhm,
So if you're listening to this podcast, you can ask your questions right
mhm.
now, and then also just pay attention to the answers if you're viewing the recording.
Yep.
So let's see the first one. How can individuals translate the DEI philosophy that we have in our companies into their everyday lives? Oh, this is a great question.
Jump in first, Cherie. What do you say?
Okay. I will say this, all of it's translatable.
Hmm.
When you're paying attention to things as far as bias, as far as building relationships, trusting people, all of those things translate over
Hmm.
as far as how you treat people, how you're being respectful, how you recognize and leverage
Hmm.
difference, leverage it. You can leverage it at your children's school, at your church, at your whatever
Absolutely.
volunteer thing you do, that you need to be paying attention to difference and leveraging it,
Hmm.
using it for the benefit of everybody's benefit. So
Absolutely.
I think that's a really easy transition,
Yeah,
actually.
I agree. And again, I think once you've learned better, once we training, I think the training is important. I had a 3.5 hour session just last week at Fidelity
Mhm.
on diversity, inclusion, and leadership, inclusive leadership. And again, I feel like I often read these things, but when you really go through a well-crafted education piece on that, and it makes you more aware beyond that. Absolutely. And some of the things you said earlier, just being friendly to people, just being courteous and knowing that everybody has a story. And even if someone kind of grumps at you or bumps you, their bumps their cart into you at the grocery store, there could be a lot of stuff going on there could be a lot of stuff going on at their in their house, and just know that just know that there are things going on in people's lives, and be understanding and tolerant, and just try to be good. And I think that goes a long way toward how we treat each other, and again, regardless of our differences.
Yeah, and I want to point out, I would be remiss if I didn't say, for each person that's on this call, if you take an inventory of the different areas in your life where you may have privilege, you may have,
Hmm.
abilities and things that you can do that other people cannot, you take that, because
Hmm.
that's power, and you
Hmm.
use it to change things for other people.
Also.
You use it to change systems, policies, practices, procedures. Again, you can do that at your workplace, but you can
Right.
do it outside with things like voting, with things like paying attention in your neighborhoods, in your cities, to make sure that things are equitable for people. All you have to do is pay attention. There's all kind of things that you can have an impact on, you, the individual. You don't have to sit back and wait for somebody else to do it, to make life more equitable for everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's
Oh,
great.
look,
Oh yeah,
I,
someone says I'm also from Abilene. What would you recommend for someone just getting their feet wet and D&I work at their company? Hopefully, again, depending on the size or who you work for, hopefully they have employee resource groups. I would say that's the first place I always recommend. Get engaged with some of the networks that hopefully you have at your company. Again, if you're a really small company, we can talk on the side about it. But like at Fidelity, and I'm sure at Fossil, you have one. We have an African American. We have Latino. We have, the Pride group. And again, I'm an ally for Pride. I'm the executive sponsor for our Pride employee resource group. And I just think if you get engaged and start having those conversations, and all of them tend to do volunteer work out in the community that relate to what they're passionate about. To me, that's how you get your feet wet, is starting to interact and see that. And you don't have to be in that group that employee research group is built for. Be there as an ally. Be there someone that wants to understand more about the Asian population and what they deal with here. And I think that is the best way to get started. And if it becomes a passion and you realize it, start making it known that you want to be in those jobs. And I think the one thing negative, I guess, about our industry and about what we do, about our skill set here, is that there aren't a lot of them. Even in big companies, there's not a ton of people in the diversity group, typically. And so there's not always a lot of jobs, but there's a lot of ways, and they always need volunteer help and need help. And who knows, maybe you'll rise up the ranks and someday actually have a job in this part as well. And Sheree, what do you think?
yeah, so that's my friend. Hey, Ursula. But here's what I would say as well. In addition to employee resource groups, which absolutely, I would say when you see issues, when you see things,
Mhm.
find the champions in your organization. The higher
Right.
up, the better, because they're the ones with the influence, they're
Hmm.
the ones that can move things, and start to talk to them and build those relationships and let them know about, hey, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? Or listen out to see which executives, which people,
Hmm.
senior leaders are talking about
Right.
DEI, and go to them and let them
Hmm.
know about what your thoughts are. I've
Right.
since I've been here at Fossil, just being out and talking to people, I've had employees come back to me and say, "Hey, I had this idea," and I'm like, you know what? That is a great idea, because I
Hmm.
can't see everything. I
Sure.
don't know everything. I'm just one person, and I tell people all the time here at Fossil, I'm like, it might be in my job title, but it's in everybody's job description. It's implicit
Absolutely.
to
Yes,
work
that's
on
great.
diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I want them to come to me with ideas. I want
Hmm.
them to come to me with thoughts, and see what we can get implemented, again, to make the workforce more equitable, to make it more inclusive. And you never know who has that next great idea that can push the whole organization
Hmm.
forward. So
Yeah.
align with the champions. The higher the champions, the better. And if you're so fortunate to have someone leading DEI, go and talk to them and let them know, here's my thoughts, here's how can I help, and that's how you start getting involved.
Absolutely. We love hearing from people that love that. Absolutely. That's great. I'm gonna steal that, by the way, Sheri. It's not my job title, but it's my job description for
Yeah.
everybody. I think that is spot on. So great.
There goes Sukari. I know her as well. I think this might just be a comment. DEI is a calling for those of us who are passionate in this field, and Sukari at Georgetown University is outstanding.
Great.
It sounds like as hard as you ran from it, the calling enticed you. It did. Sometimes I'm still running, but I'm like, no, I'm a fighter too. So I'm like, look, what else can I do? I just get back in there and keep going. Thank you, Sukari.
That's great.
All right. So I think we're at time. We want to be respectful of everybody's time. And we really, really appreciate each and every one of you spending a little time with us today, coming to hear a little bit about diversity and inclusion, culture, Dallas Love Field Airport. And I really appreciate each and every one of you, those people that I do know and those that I haven't met yet. Thank you so much for spending time with us. And Scott, I'll let you have the last word.
Yeah, I'm just saying, don't forget to check every episode of Dallas Love Field's Lead with Love. Wherever you get your podcast, share it with the people you love. Head over to Apple Podcasts, give it a 5-star rating. We love that. We'd love to see some traffic. But these are great conversations. And again, I've seen a few of them as well. And it's just so nice to hear people talking about it and hear everyone's perspective. That's the beauty of this area, is that we all have good, strong opinions. And when you're passionate about it, man, there's so much we can do. So, Sheri, thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it. And thanks to all the folks at Dallas Love Field for having us both.
Bye-bye.